I want to help to provide some clarity in terms of what good looks like and the types of questions that a business leader should be asking themselves to at least have some certainty. So this checklist, sourced from the Institute of Directors in combination with the team at WorkSafe back in 2016, produced a 10-step checklist to help provide some clarity to officers of organizations, backed by the blue document, which is kind of a good practice guidelines for business officers here in New Zealand to help meet the requirements of the Health and Safety at Work Act 2015. So the first question a officer of a business should be asking themselves is, how did the board and all of the directors demonstrate their commitment to health and safety? And the first thing that springs to mind is a workplace health and safety policy statement that is spelling out exactly what the organization is committing to in terms of meeting the expectations of the Health and Safety at Work Act, regulations, subsequent amendments to the Act. It may also align the organization to a particular standard. So it may be ISO 45001, for example, as a threshold or a standard that the organization is setting itself to meet. The reason it being is that every business or undertaking in New Zealand must have a safe system of work in place. What does that look like in practice? Well, that's why myself and my colleagues steer businesses towards ISO 45001, because it's an internationally recognized standard, and it's not likely to be going away anytime soon. Even if organizations aren't intending to become certified to that standard, why wouldn't you, in all honesty? And perhaps that could be a subject for a conversation in the comments thread down below. But in terms of that first question, how did the board and the directors demonstrate their commitment to health and safety? The traditional health and safety policy statement that lists exactly what the business is attempting to achieve, signed and dated by either the CEO, the managing director, or all of the officers of the organization, and ideally have that placed somewhere visibly across the organization, and build that into the organization's employee induction training process and annual refresher as well. Second, how do you ensure that your organization's risks are assessed and appropriate mitigation measurements are put into place? The easiest way to ensure that that is the case is to have a readily available, routinely updated hazard and risk register. All known hazards that cannot be eliminated within the organization should be recorded in a central space. For larger organizations, you may have local hazard and risk registers for business units or offices in various locations, but there should be a central record of all known hazards and risks within the organization, which also details the initial risk rating, the controls using the hierarchy of controls, starting with elimination, working our way down to the bottom of that rung, which has been PPE, residual risks. Then the board and the senior leaders then need to ask themselves, well, what is an acceptable residual risk rating? And are the residual risks that we have identified and recorded in this register still acceptable to us today? So when the board of directors get together during their monthly or bi-monthly meetings, the thing that they should be doing is looking at the top residual risk ratings. There may only be half a dozen, and asking themselves the question, are the residual risk ratings still acceptable to us? Are the current controls that are in place to mitigate those risks still as effective as they were when this was first recorded? And if there is any sense of unease, or there's an opportunity to reduce those risks further, or even better, to eliminate them, the board of directors should then be insisting that that is the case. So that would be how I would answer that second question. The third question of the top 10 questions I would be asking if I was an officer in New Zealand is, how does the organization involve its workers in health and safety? What routine engagement and participation processes does the organization have? So that could be monthly all-team meetings. That could be around the water cooler meetings. It could be informal sessions in the kitchen environment during a lunch and learn, for example. Or it could be more formally structured systems such as a health and safety committee and representative structure. Remembering that workers also includes contractors and service providers as well. So having a think about how do we engage and work with those other parties. So whether that's just simply sharing hazard and risk information between the various parties, or having some formal or informal communication channel with them. Could just simply be a monthly, quarterly update. These are the things that we're working on at the moment. What are you guys working on? And doing a bit of a show and tell and sharing of that type of information. All right, number 4 of the top 10 list. How do you ensure that the organization's health and safety targets are challenging, realistic, and aren't creating unintended consequences? I love that. So good. So that's having smart KPIs, basically. Simple, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound. So it could be we have committed to doing a monthly all-team meeting. The KPI for the next 12 months ahead is 12 times monthly meetings, and the acceptable standard is maybe 11 out of 12 meetings achieved for the year ahead. That would be a metric that would be easily measurable and a little bit challenging, and also time bound, right? So it's meeting all those smart thresholds. We could also be talking about some of the lag type indicators as well. So it could be the number of lost time injuries and all that kind of old school way of thinking, but there's still some value, I believe, in using lag indicators, even if they have really fallen out of fashion. The really nice thing I like about that is the unintended consequences, and that often comes about with the lag type reporting, but also I would say is the near miss type reporting as well. So if the company, for example, this is an unintended consequences, if the organization or the officer of the organization is pushing to have all members of the team report, 4 near miss reports a month, then what you will find is that you will suddenly get a ton of reports, but the value of those reports just bottoms out because people are just making up crap just to comply with the work instruction, right? So it's having a think about unintended consequences of the types of metrics that the officers are requesting. So keep it simple, keep it proactive, keep it useful for the organization, and avoid putting in work instructions that send us in all sorts of crazy ways. Another really good example is the zero harm KPI, which has been in favor for a while. It's starting now to fall out of favor in the health and safety space. The unintended consequences of that is people will start to change and twist the way in which incidents are being reported. Number 5 of the top 10 things I would be asking myself as an officer of an organization to have some sense of confidence that I am meeting my duties and responsibilities as an officer. Okay, what data is the board receiving on both health and safety, and is this sufficient? So the board often their key, well, their main source of health and safety related information is the traditional health and safety board report that they will get to read, if you're lucky, on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. That's generally where they get their source of information. So as a health and safety manager, advisor, coordinator, consultant, the board report is key. It's essential to being able to paint a true picture of how things are performing within that organization. Another way in which the board can receive health and safety data is by getting out of the boardroom and spending time with people on the floor. So whether that's in the office environment or at the coalface, right? And not being there awkwardly or telling people what to do, but being there and showing a genuine interest in what the people are up to, asking open-ended questions rather than closed type of questions. By doing that, it reinforces the information they're receiving at the board report level. One of the KPIs that I recommend organizations to implement is to have at least one day a year for the members of the board to get out and about, to spend time in amongst the organization within those higher risk work environments. If it can be more frequently than that, brilliant, bring it on. But at least by doing that, it's giving them some sense of assurity that what they're being told in writing is actually happening in practice. Okay, next, how does the organization ensure all workers are competent and adequately trained in their health and safety responsibilities and accountabilities? So this requires the organization to have a training record. It also requires the organization to define what competence means to that organization. Often companies of all shapes and sizes fail in this spot. They forget to do it. And so what does competence actually mean? How do we verify that? What are the processes? Does that include work activity observations by other members of the team? Does that include having input or insights from external stakeholders? What does it mean to be an adequately or suitable training provider? What are some of the criteria that the organization accepts as adequate training provider requirements? Because often what we tend to do is we just send people out to receive training. We don't really think too much about the quality or the content of that training. We just want to get the unit standards or to get the certificate to say that we've done it, right? Is that really making our people competent? And those are the types of questions that a member of the board, the officers, should be asking the management team to have adequate systems and structures in place to ensure that that happens in practice. All right, team, I'm sorry, I'm very aware of the time and I'm doing my usual and going off on tangents. Does the organization have sufficient resources, people, equipment, systems, and budget for its health and safety program? Really key component of the duty of the officer is the resourcing section. So ensuring that everyone has the processes, the policies, the systems to report, to act on those findings and to close out those findings and to be able to demonstrate that that's happened in practice. Ensuring that people are adequately equipped with the right equipment to do what it is they are set to do. Having a robust health and safety management system really does help, as does electronic reporting systems make this piece of the puzzle a lot easier to manage. The role of the officer here would be to ensure that the management team and the executive have applied adequate resource and energy in the development of a robust and suitable health and safety management system, perhaps aligned to a certificate, to a particular standard, as I mentioned earlier on, and that the officers of the organization need to have some confidence that that is then working in practice. So it's making sure that the KPIs are on track, ensuring that the health and safety management system has perhaps been tested and verified by a certification body, or at least aligned to, certainly goes some way to hitting that target. Okay, does the organization have a schedule of audits and reviews to ensure the health and safety management system is fit for purpose? Internal auditing using a recognized framework from 1 year to the next. We're asking the same types of questions and we're looking for evidence to ensure that what we said was going to get done is actually happening in practice from a systems point of view. And then externally, whether that's from a third-party professional expert or a certification body, to provide further assurance that the system is fit for purpose and is actually happening in practice. Okay, so how do you ensure that actions identified in incident reports, audits and reviews are communicated to the appropriate level within the organization and effectively addressed by the organization? Again, this kind of goes hand in hand with the idea of having adequate reporting systems in place. And it could be bow tie, it could be ICANN, whatever the methodology happens to be. I strongly encourage officers of businesses to ensure that the people who are put in charge of running these investigations know what they're doing, because I am growing increasingly concerned that our capability in New Zealand at large, when it comes to incident investigations, is incredibly inadequate. I'm serious about that. Like, I have a really privileged position of being able to review incident investigations from tier 1 and tier 2 main contractors throughout New Zealand, and I'm becoming quite concerned about the quality and the depth of these investigations, which all seem to be very surface level, and many seem to be skirting around reporting these incidents as incidents, and instead are reporting them as near-miss events, which in many cases I would argue are anything but near misses. Really interesting times. Okay, last couple. I'm mindful of time. Number 9, hopefully I've been keeping my count on the right. How does the organization's performance compare with other comparable organizations, and how do you know? Okay, so this is the second and the second to last question within the IOD guidance material, and the list of questions that they recommend officers of a business to ask themselves. So, how does the organization's performance compare with other comparable organizations, and how do you know? Really interesting question, right? So there's various forums out there that provide some benchmarking. Business Health and Safety, no, the Business Leaders Health and Safety Forum has some metrics where they get their members to submit their data, and it gives you a bit of a benchmark. There are also third-party solution providers out there. So straight off the bat, I can think of one, which is Safe365, which has a phenomenal dashboarding system, which allows businesses who are subscribed to Safe365 to be able to see compare industry to industry, and see where they sit within their overall culture and engagement score, so that they can then have a sense of how they are performing in comparison to others within their industry and across other sectors of the Kiwi business community. Really interesting insights. Other than that, I'm not sure how an organization would be able to, with any sense of confidence, have that type of data. Unfortunately, WorkSafe certainly doesn't have the data. ACC doesn't seem to have the data. The Business Leaders Health and Safety Forum made it very clear that in terms of information and data in New Zealand, when it comes to health and safety performance, it just ain't there. So we need to get over the fact that we need to rely on third-party private sectors to be able to give us that type of information. So if you do have a subscription to a particular system, whether it's EcoPortal, Assura, Safe365, whatever, have a look to see if you can get access to their statistics, because then you might be able to then do some benchmarking across your industries and other sectors as well. Interesting. And the last one, I'm well over time, I'm sorry, is how do you recognize and celebrate success? So as a business leader, an officer of an organization or an undertaking, how does the business recognize and celebrate success? Because health and safety is almost always put in the negative bucket. And again, this is going back to why I like ISO 45001, is because the hazards and risks are also complemented with opportunities. And so you start to get used to this type of language and this type of framework. You start thinking health and safety isn't a negative thing. What are the opportunities that the organization is currently experiencing? What else out there can we do to make this place a better, safer, more economically viable, thriving business? And so how do we acknowledge and celebrate health and safety performance? It can be formal, scheduled activities. It could be another example, and it's something I talk about in another video of mine, is the recognition and acknowledgement of health and safety representatives and the health and safety committee. Wouldn't it be awesome if businesses that have the resources to have an annual conference for your health and safety reps, bring all your reps together and just spend a day celebrating and acknowledging how awesome they are, bringing in expert trainers, giving them the opportunity to spend time with one another and to feel a sense of worth and acknowledgement. It's a huge piece of the puzzle, and I've seen it in practice where it completely invigorates and refreshes the health and safety representative and committee structures, and makes it a really desirable role where there's actually wait lists for people to become a health and safety rep in that organization. So that's just a couple of examples of how that could be achieved. Or it could just simply be chocolate fish at the end of the month. John, you did a really good job. Or a weekly acknowledgement of the amazing members that NZHSP has on this Facebook group. It all plays a part, right? So anyway, that's a bit of a mad ramble over my advice in terms of the 10 things I would be asking as an officer of an organization, to have some sense of security or verification that what we are doing is meeting the expectations and standards and thresholds of the Health and Safety at Work Act and what the regulator would be expecting of us.